Hello, I'm Gino Jones with ClearCreek Siding. To help with your installation, we've created this video on how to install our concrete, log, and timber siding. We have included a video index for your use. You can either watch the video from start to finish or just jump to a particular section. Before we get started, be sure to review the paperwork provided with the order. There's a packing slip with a list of items that's on the order, a load sheet, which is a list of items on each pallet, a sill schedule, which is a list of the window and door trim, a hard copy of the installation instructions, and a part catalog, which is dimension drawings of the system parts. To help you become more familiar with our system, we provided some photos of the components as well as the fasteners and coatings. Now that you've had a chance to review the order paperwork and our system components, you're ready to get started. What I'm going to do right now is establish my elevation, and this is the point where we want the siding to start or begin. And after we snap a line at that point, we are going to snap another line where we want to set our starter clip based on the style of siding we're using and the chart that's in the installation instructions. What we're going to do now is, using these 5-inch screws, we are going to temporarily attach the right and the left hand square outside corner so that we can get the measurements for hanging our siding. What we're going to do now is we're going to make a mark on our second line every 3 foot, and that's where we're going to place a starter clip. It's a little J clip that's attached with a 2.5-inch screw, and we want to make sure that we have these every 3 foot and at the edge of every piece of siding. Now we have our starter clips placed every 3 feet. We're going to go ahead and install our first course of siding. That course will sit, the bottom edge will sit in those clips. Now I've made a mark for my first course every 12 inches. And every 12 inches, I'm going to install a 2.5 inch screw with a washer at a 20-degree angle through this nail point. The main thing here is that we do not want to apply that screw and washer too high or too low, and we don't want to over tighten the washer to where it breaks through the material. So now we're going to be talking about cutting the product. We'll be using a 12-inch sliding miter saw. And the main thing I want to remember is just to cut smooth and slow and let the blade cut the part. Secondly, I'm going to be marking it using a piece of welder's soap, stone, or chalk so that any intersecting lines will be easy to remove later. Now we're ready to go ahead and attach our second course of siding. So every course after the first course, we're going to run our 2.5 inch screw and washer every 24 inches. We're also going to make sure that every butt joint or end joint that we use a concrete factory edge with that clear silicone, a 1/4 inch bead running along the entire edge on the inside of that edge-to-edge joint. We also want to make sure that we have a 2.5 inch screw and washer, 1.5 inches from every edge-to-edge siding joint. You will continue to install the siding up the wall around the windows and doors. When you get to the soffit, simply get a measurement between soffit and your next to last piece of siding. Then rip down your last piece of siding and apply with 5-inch screws through the face, which you'll fill with concrete fill mix later. In order to allow space for your termination trim at the window and doors, you can use a piece of termination trim and a Sharpie to make a mark where the siding stops. You'll install the termination trim permanently after the siding is installed. So now we want to install our sill trim and head trim at the top and the bottom of the windows. We just want to ensure that our slope is at the top so the water runs away from the window. We want to use a 5-inch screw toe-nailed through the bottom, about 2.5 inches from the wall. This will be hidden by the siding. We want to use a 2.5 inch screw at the top, about 2 inches from the edge. That'll be hidden by the termination. So what I've done here is I've used a scrap piece of siding to get my measurements. I've used a table saw to make a cut in the siding for under the sill. I've also made a back cut with a razor knife. I'm going to silicone the siding where it meets the sill, and then this piece of siding will be attached with a 5-inch screw through the face. You will fill this with concrete fill mix later. Now we're ready to mark our siding for the notch around the sill or the head trim. Now first we'll want to tape off the sill or head trim so that we don't mark it up. And then we'll take a scrap piece of siding and we'll go ahead and use that to get our mark for where we're going to need to make that cut. So now we're going to talk about cutting terminations. And these are the terminations that run vertically at the windows. We go ahead and get our mark at the sill and transfer that to the part. And then we use that mark to set up our saw for the cut. Before installing your vertical terminations at the doors and windows, you will need to put 2 1/4-inch beads of silicone along the siding ends as shown here. So now I've applied a 1/4-inch bead of clear silicone to all my cut edges of siding, and I'm going to put a bead of clear silicone at the top of the sill and at the bottom of the head trim, and then install my termination. Now I'm going to go ahead and finish installing my termination trim by applying 2 5-inch screws. So now after we've ran the wall on both sides, we're ready to permanently install our outside corner. Now at the completion of hanging our siding, we'll want to come back and apply clear silicone to all these cuts around the sills and head trims and where the termination meets the sill and head trim. In certain instances, such as around decks, porches, and roof rakes, you may not be able to incorporate the elevation change with a full piece of siding. In those instances, we would simply rip down a piece of siding and then coat it with our Foam Coat 550. If you've chosen the round outside corner, installation is essentially like the timber siding. The main difference being that we're going to use a wood round outside corner base. I've already snapped my lines and set my starter clips, and now I'm going to install the base. Now as you can see, we've ran our siding from the bottom to the top on both the left and the right hand side. And now we're ready to install our round outside corner permanently. But before we do that, we're going to need to put a 1/4 inch bead of clear silicone along the edge of each piece of siding, and then a little bead underneath that. And then 2 beads of clear silicone along both sides of the round outside corner wood base. Now after we've ran a 1/4 inch bead of clear silicone along both sides of that wood corner base and the outside edge of each piece of siding, now we're ready to go ahead and finish installing the corner. We'll do this using 6 to 8 5-inch screws, which will run through the center of the corner, countersink, fill those with concrete fill mix, allow that to dry, and then seal it with the clear concrete sealer. Here are a few helpful hints to keep in mind before, during, and after your installation. We don't want to bounce the product. It's 12 foot long and can become damaged. Protect the concrete sealer. Keep it indoors. We don't want it to freeze. If it becomes frozen, it will be unusable. Use soapstone or chalk as opposed to pencil to mark your parts. That way any intersecting lines will be easy to remove. Our siding has minimal expansion or contraction, so there's no need to leave a gap at the joints. Remove any dust from the parts as you saw, as it will be hard to remove later. Avoid getting silicone and concrete fill mix on the parts. Thank you for taking the time to watch this installation video. Together with the written installation instructions, you should have everything you need to complete your installation. Once again, thank you for watching our video. If you have any questions at all, please do not hesitate to contact us. We're always here to help.